This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Gadget Geeks show number 394, recorded on March 14th. Happy Pi Day to you, by the way, 2019. Here at Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all the favorite tech gadgets that find their way into your home. News, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the AverageGuy.tv studios here in a Mike Uyghur. I thought the weather was changing for a moment. We saw some sunshine, and then no. I think
Omaha's bipolar. We can't decide what we want to do. Do you want to be, Antarctica? Do you want to be decently okay? All the snow, it's like melting, then it's not. The problem here, though, Jim, is we melt during the day, then it freezes at night, and we have ice problems in the morning. It's ridiculous. Just choose one or the other, Omaha. Come on.
Yeah, I thought we were done. Weather was gone. I thought we were done, and then we've had this cyclone. I think they're calling it a cyclone bomb that came over the Midwest and dropped a foot of snow in Denver. And I mean, it's just been nuts. So, Mike Howard, you're not struggling with any snow down there in Atlanta, are you?
Not here in Atlanta. No, 77 and beautiful here today.
Oh, I hate you.
I did just a second ago have to send out a report about our stores in Colorado that have been hit by that. But here in Atlanta, no, it's beautiful.
Waffle House still open in Colorado?
I was just checking the hourly sales. Everything's still great.
I don't appreciate it here, Jim, but I was in Wyoming to ski over the weekend, and they were getting a solid 6 inches a day while we were out there overnight. It was the most perfect snow ski weather you could even ask for. So while I hate it here, I did enjoy the benefits of it out there.
John Panozzo from Unraid is here tonight. John, you're in Chicago, so you have a little bit of the same issues that Mike Uyghur and I. How's the weather in Chicago?
Today was beautiful. Today was really, really warm. But then again, we're supposed to get another, I think, couple inches of snow this weekend. So I don't understand it.
It's the winter that just won't give up. It's the second winter, as they say, right? And so
that's how our Marches and Februarys go here in Chicago. It's like, okay, we're going to make it really cold, then we're going to give you a taste of spring, and then we're just going to take that back. That's just the pattern of behavior here.
East Coast Servers in the chat room says not just 77 here, but humid sucks already. Well, hey, be careful what you wish for.
Wow.
On that. And of course, I'll remind everyone, we post the show with show notes. Tonight, not a lot of show notes that we're going to put together. A lot of conversation around Unraid. We'll mention them as we go, but you can still head out to the AverageGuy.tv. By the way, I spent a bunch of time 2 weekends ago kind of changing the theme, and we've removed the old live page, so we're back to just a single live page. It's actually HTTPS. So if your browser was alerting you that that wasn't secure, we did that for Chatwing, and then Chatwing went under. So we just started using YouTube Chat. And you can head out to the AverageGuy.tv if you want to see that. Christian gave me the official seal of approval on the site. He likes it, so it must be good enough if you're going to do that. I haven't seen the new site. Check it out. A lot more mobile responsive and mobile friendly as well. Don't forget, if you haven't downloaded the mobile app yet, the AverageGuy.tv all of a sudden Mike, I think I've said that 8,000 times. No, because that's not the right answer. HomeGadgetGeeks.com. Holy cow, maybe the wine from dinner is affecting me already. HomeGadgetGeeks.com for the mobile app. If you want to download it, easiest way to listen on the road. And when you're traveling, you can stream it right from there. We want to thank the Patreon subscribers who've kind of helped me pay for that, and we appreciate it. Big thanks to Aaron Lawrence, who joined us last week. And of course, if you haven't listened, go back. Aaron brings it every week. Mike Uyghur, I was a little disappointed. I knew you were skiing, but you missed a good one.
I think I've missed Erin twice. I've been on with her also as well, and I miss her every time. And she brings it every week. It was awesome having her.
She did a great job, and so Erin, we appreciate your work out here as well. We're going to get Erin back on. Mike, you and I quizzed her. She's building this completely digital automobile for travel, so it's like a travel van, and they've outfitted it with USB ports everywhere and batteries and all kinds of tech gear. So she said she thinks that'll be ready late spring. So we're gonna do a live walkthrough with her, where she's on with us walking through each of the tech gadgets that's in this van, this travel.
I'm totally on board for that.
Yeah, super sweet, isn't it? So, so we'll get her lined up here in the spring. But Aaron, thanks for coming on. All right, I already mentioned him, already announced him, but John from Unraid is with us today. John, thank you, and thank Unraid for taking the hour tonight to kind of spend time with us. I appreciate it. Welcome to Home Gadget Geeks.
Thank you very much, man. It's great to be here.
Good to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of your role at Unraid, how long you've been there, some of those kinds of things, just so we can get to know you a little bit.
Sure. So I joined Lime Technology back in 2014. So I've been there for about 5 years now. And I joined because prior to that, I worked for the reseller industry for IT technology. So anything from Citrix to Microsoft to Cisco to NetApp to EMC to VMware, you name it, that was in my wheelhouse. And I was really fascinated with virtualization technology. I thought that stuff was really cool. And right around that time frame, I found Unraid because my buddies were using it. You know, same way most of us find out about it. Our buddies are using it. And he told me, you know, Eric, our other developer, told me, hey, you got to get this Unraid stuff. It's amazing. It's a way better solution for setting up a home media server than anything else I've ever found. I'm like, okay, great. Got into it, really liked it, and then heard Tom, our CEO, was working on a new version, moving to 64-bit, moving in the direction of adding VMs. And I'm like, this is my wheelhouse. I got to be a part of this. So I reached out, flew out, met with Tom, you know, found out about how the company started, went through the whole history of the whole thing. And I really thought that there was something there. So I joined up, Eric joined up, and it's been an amazing ride. It's been really an amazing ride. But my role there is I'm actually the chief strategy officer. But when you work for a company like this, you wear so many hats. So the title doesn't say much because I handle customer support. I handle business partnerships. I handle working with OEMs. And if you schedule services through our website to talk to one of us, you're going to talk to me. So there's so many different cookie jars that I got my hand in.
Nice. How big is Unraid and how dispersed are you guys?
So we have 4 full-time employees, but we have a handful of additional contractors that are developers that work for us throughout the globe. So we got folks out of Australia, we've got folks in the Netherlands. You know, we're based out of Chicago, me and Eric, and then Tom's based out of California. Spencer's also out of California. So we're very geographically dispersed, and then our community is also, of course, worldwide. And there's so many different people that have contributed to the project over the years. So I couldn't even begin to count how many people have had a hand in the code one way or another.
Yeah, it's been around a long time. Okay, I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this. I'm going to put you on the spot. What's your Unraid server? How big is it?
Which one?
Yeah, there you go. That's the correct answer.
Right, right. So I have a handful. At this office that I'm at, my home office, I actually just built a new rig this week. And when I say I really mean Eric. And then I supervised Eric because, yeah, these big hands don't work well in a chassis. So, but it's an i9 9900K CPU. I've got an RTX 2080 Ti in there for the GPU. It's water cooled. I'm overclocking it. And it's running a VM. And that's how I'm talking with you guys today. I'm running in a Windows 10 VM with that GPU passed through with a USB controller. The onboard USB controller is passed through. And Unraid's actually booting off of a secondary PCIe card that's another USB controller. So it's on its own independent USB controller from the main board. So I can still use all the front mounted ports for USB and whatnot, just like a regular desktop. Use a webcam, 34-inch Acer Predator monitor. What else you want to know? 32 gigs of RAM.
How much did you say? How much storage you got on there then?
Well, so this one I'm using 2 M.2 PCIe NVMe SSDs. So the Samsung 960 Pros, I believe. So there's 2 terabytes. They're running my cache pool. And then actually for HDD storage, I don't have much on this one. It's just 2 drives. And it's not even, it's like a 3 terabyte and a 2 terabyte. It's just for testing purposes. This guy over here has 40 or 50 terabytes. And you can't see it, but it's a 45 drive storinator. So they sent me one out because they wanted me to have a system to test with. They were having some issues with VMs, and in order to be able to provide that support, I got to have a replica of the hardware because it was kind of a hardware specific issue. But this is a really awesome box, by the way. I got to say, they're not paying me to say that. It's a really, really good box. So if you're looking for something off the shelf, it's pretty amazing.
I think that's everyone's dream Unraid box, right? Is a 45 drives machine.
Well, this one's the AV15, so it's not the full big boy 3U chassis with 45 slots in it. Okay. It's only got, I think it's got 15 3.5-inch bays and 10 2.5-inch bays, so you can build a decent cache pool in there. But it's still, I mean, with hard drives being as big as they are today, that's still a lot of storage.
Oh yeah.
So
we got involved. Mike Uyghur and I got involved in burst crypto mining, and so of course that's proof of capacity, or it's storage based. So you are rewarded for the more storage you have.
Oh,
and
nice.
So I never thought in a million years I'd ever have anything more than, I don't know, 8 or 10 terabytes. And now I'm running 70 in the house.
Wow.
You know, and you kind of like, so all of a sudden these numbers have gotten a little bit relative. I don't I run them. I kind of run them off a bunch of things because you don't need or you don't want to rate them. In this case, you want to get every single little bit of capacity you can sneak out of those things.
Yes.
But I have certainly seen, we have a community, a burst community in a pool, and some listeners come over from that pool, and we have seen some pretty big implementations of this. Speaking of that, Mike Howard, why don't you talk real quick? What's your setup? What are you running? You've been running this forever. So tell us, what's your current implementation?
10-ish years. So my current, and this is what I was telling John in the pre-show, my hardware is a little underpowered, but believe it or not, it's more powerful than what I was running before. And I have 64 terabyte of storage. I think 11 disks, 2 parity drives, so 13 total disks there, 2 cache drives. So that makes it 15 drives. You have a Norco 4020 case is my case. That case, I've been running the whole 10 years. Not a single fan in that thing has died. Every fan in that thing, it runs 24/7, is still running. CPU, this is where you're going to start to get laughing at me. CPU is an AMD Athlon 640.
Athlon. Wow. I have not heard that name in a long time. Well,
that's a quad. So
speaks to the software though, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
there you go.
Yeah.
And that is a bump up from what I was running before, where I did have some performance problems, but let me keep going. So 16 gig of RAM. So that's not bad for what I'm doing. I don't run any VMs on it. I am running Crusader, which I love Crusader.
Oh yeah.
I'm running the Nextcloud with the things that go with it, Duck DNS and the Mario DB and all that kind of stuff. Duplicati, which I back up stuff to Backblaze to B2. That thing runs, I've never had a problem with it. And then very light usage of Plex. I have that installed, but I use very light usage of it. So mainly it's a file server for me.
Sure.
I do have 3 Mediasonic external enclosures connected to it, because my largest files are my podcast files. I have something like 12 terabyte of those, and I don't back them up online. I just back them up to those external drives, using Crusader to do that sync and to back them up there. The thought being, if I lose those, it's not the end of the world for me. And I have the final copies up on the web where I can get them. All the rest of my critical data, I use Duplicati to back up. And so mainly for a file server, and I'm getting, when I'm writing to the cache, I'm saturating my gig network pretty much. I'm getting, pretty good speed there. And as far as file server goes, for me, it works just wonderfully. But as I was mentioning in the pre-show, I'm thinking I'm at the point where now I'm ready to upgrade the CPU and the motherboard and everything. And I was leaning toward the Threadripper and having a little bit more RAM, maybe 64 gig of RAM, and eventually doing some VMs, not heavy VMs, not gaming VMs. I'm going to do that on my main PC, but some VMs for some other usage. And I don't know if we're ready to talk about that. But
well, I was going to say, John, you have any advice on a Threadripper? You guys probably haven't tried those yet.
Oh, no, we have. We had, so Eric actually was the first one to get into Threadripper. And as a developer, you really see the value of those cores really quickly when you're compiling the Linux kernel. So it's pretty amazing how that thing blows the doors off of any of the Intel systems we have. And he had that for a little while. And then our CEO was actually looking for an upgrade. So Eric kind of found a way to shift that down the bench, and I should say up the bench, I guess, in this case. And he got a Threadripper too. And the performance on it is definitely better than the original Threadripper. But I mean, if you already had a Threadripper 1, I wouldn't tell you to go buy the Threadripper 2 right now. I mean, you probably are still getting the miles out of the current hardware you got. But yeah, Threadripper is amazing, especially as an application server, because you've got 3 uses of Unraid are really, a basic NAS, then you've got the application server layer, and then you've got VMs. And with applications like Plex, especially as your concurrent user count increases, the amount of CPU horsepower you need to do that transcoding also increases. And then the value of having those additional cores also increases. So yeah, that's a huge win over any of the other options in the market. So yeah, we love Threadripper for that.
Mike Howard, you probably aren't experiencing too many heat problems with your AMD setup, right? It's a pretty cool processor, right?
It is, and I have it in another room because that Norco 4020 case is loud. The issues I've run into with the case is I just put in a 10 terabyte Iron Wolf Seagate. I'm going to try Seagates again. I'm not in favor of those.
Wow.
I'm going to try it again. They're just a tad thicker than the other drives, and my Norco 420 case is having a little trouble pushing them in there. So that's one issue. Before we go off of me, I did want to say one of the moments where I knew I was going to be in love with Unraid was when I switched from the old hardware I had to this hardware I'm using now. I was going to say my new hardware, but the hardware I'm using now, that Athlon CPU. So in the process of changing out the motherboard, the CPU, the RAM, the whole guts, I also took the USB stick, which Unraid runs on for me, over to my computer over here, upgraded the software from whatever version to the next version, not like a dot change, but a full first number change. Installed the hardware, went back to the hardware, stuck the new drive in there, booted it up, and it ran just fine. And I said that I could never do that with Windows and have no issues. It booted up like nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
It was just wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the same experience I just went through when I built the 9900K. The storage was already present in the existing system I had at the time.
Yeah.
And so my upgrade process after making Eric build it for me was to then just move the storage over, move the USB stick over, configure the BIOS, boot, and everything just picked up. Even my VM, my Windows 10 VM, you know, obviously it had to go through a second of just organizing all the hardware and device manager and whatnot, but it picked everything back up and drivers all installed and everything was fine. So that's the beauty of it, man. It's
cool.
Hardware agnostic, you know.
And
I've heard it's easy. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Knock on wood's 10 years, not a single crash related to the software. I've had hard drives, no hard drive caused a crash. A power supply caused a crash.
Okay.
But no software crash. And I'm currently running, I should say this as we head off of me, is 6.7 RC5.
Nice.
My friend out in chat right now, AD, and I like to take credit for a bunch of people who switched over to Unraid, but I think they all made their choices on their own. Uyghur made his choice on his own. My friend AD made his choice on his own. And Mark Robinson, who I don't see out there, they all made it on their own without me influencing them. But I take a little credit.
Yeah,
but
you should.
But it's running fine. The release candidate is running fine.
Awesome.
Mike Uyghur, like, I still don't know the full story of how you found this thing. Like, all of a sudden one day you're like, have you ever heard of this thing called Unraid? And I remember it's because it was like you discovered something. And I'm like, oh, geez, man, we've been talking about this for 10 years. But I don't think we talked about it on the show. Or how'd you come to it?
Well, you know, I'm kind of ashamed because I think this kind of puts me in the newcomer, not like I've been with them forever, because, you know, John's gonna make fun of you. I actually found it from the Linus Tech Tips videos, right? Like, those became extremely
Why would
popular.
I make fun of you?
Well, you know, I'm not like an OG Unraid user. I'm still new to the platform, but
that's fine. So, haven't you noticed our community is very welcoming?
It is. That's the one biggest thing I have found with Unraid. So yeah, I found it through the Linus Tech Tips video. They had been talking about it. And honestly, so I'd heard about it. And then it was a Google search because Jim, it was when I was getting out of burst mining. So what you and I talked about, I had a bunch of these drives, but they were all different sizes. So typical RAID wasn't going to work for me, but I had a ton of storage, well, a ton relative to what I needed for my home network. And I said, okay, man, I'd really love to use these in some sort of NAS box, but they're all different sizes. And honestly, a simple Google search, I was like, Unraid. I'm like, oh yeah, I've heard of Unraid, man. Like, Linus raved about that. And then I brought it up to the community, and Jim was like, well, you know, that's what Mike Howard's always talking about. Like, when we say Unraid, I'm like, oh yes, that's totally right. Like, we always attribute Unraid to Mike Howard. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe we'll give it a shot then. So I kind of went full bore. And what I did was you guys are going to laugh at my specs as well, because what I did was I had a very underpowered machine that I was using for burst mining. And I literally repurposed it, pulled the motherboard out, put it in a Rosewheel 4U 15-bay chassis, got it off Amazon for like $99, threw it all in there. So I have the Parity plus 6 other spinners, so 7 total spinners, which gives me 18 terabytes of space. And then I have 2 cache drives mirrored, and those are 500 gig apiece SSDs. So, you know, cache at 500, but it's redundant. And so, you know, 18 terabytes for me is more than enough for what I use it for. But my hardware, as far as like specs wise, Intel i7 3770. So a really
don't knock
old.
it. I'm still running that here. It's not
okay.
bad.
Good. Okay.
How many cores on that bad boy?
That's a good question.
8.
4
Hey,
hyper-threaded.
great.
hyper-threaded 8,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Hyper-threaded
that's
8.
great. That's a great CPU. I wouldn't be. Yeah. That's
And
a
it
great
cools
CPU.
pretty easy too. It's not terribly hot. You can kind of run it with the stock cooler, and it's just fine.
Yeah, Mike is not an Athlon.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Well, you know, for me though, because I thought I was going to make this, I was almost going to make this like a gaming rig that just runs on Unraid. That's like the next upgrade, right? The thing I'll do. But I have had the same experience. So I have, so at i7 3770, And I actually upgraded that from an i5 mainly because of what you mentioned with Plex. And with the concurrent users, the i5 was struggling just a little bit. So with that socket though, I didn't want to, swap out the whole motherboard. So I said, okay, with that socket set, what can I get? So that i7 was the next option. And then really RAM was the next great upgrade for me. With that burst mining box, I only needed about 4 gig. And I gave it some breathing room, gave it 16. So it's got 16 gigs of RAM with that i7. It runs like a dream for everything I need to do on it, because since I don't use daily driver VMs, I have VMs on it that I fire up for specific purposes, but they're not a machine that I'm using heavily or as a main driver. They usually have very specific purposes on, I have an Ubuntu one and a Windows 10 VM fired up on there. Same as my car, though. I have not had a single software related issue. I've had Mike makes a dumb mistake and powers the machine down mid shutdown and cause some issues, but zero software related. Like, I have never had that level of experience on an operating system. And that's kind of what I'm interested to see is, okay, well, what's the secret sauce here? How is this so rock solid and run so well? And I am also running 6.7 RC5. Excited to see when that actually goes to the stable branch. I don't know if we get any insight here on when's that going to go to the stable branch instead of being, I guess, beta or whatever you guys call it. But it runs great. I mean, who can run these, especially these release candidates, and have them still be as rock solid as they were? I didn't lose any capability when I made that switch. So as far as what I'm running on it, Dockers, Crusader, we already talked about, Sonar, Radar. And then when you talk about Nextcloud, but also, Mike Howard, have you tried, I don't even know how you say it, but Collabora for Nextcloud essentially gives you a Google Drive experience, or like a Google Docs experience where you can get into it. Everyone can edit. You can edit it within the web page. Great plugin. Love that one. Let's Encrypt, Duplicati, and Plex, and Tutuli, and then Unify. It's also my Unify controller for my network. So it has taken over the use of like 3 other machines. I had 3 other machines in my rack, and now I'm like, I really don't need a server rack anymore. I have one box that's really could do everything I needed to do. I had a bunch of different machines doing a couple of those tasks, but with Unraid, it makes it so easy to combine all those into one box. It's been fantastic. So yeah, that's my setup and that's what I'm running. And I think it's just been rock solid ever since day one.
John, when you're the community guy and you've heard 2 examples of what we have for the community here, when you get a feel, and East Coast Servers in the chat room was asking a little bit about, he has 144 terabytes on one of his Unraid boxes. When you hear, like, generally when folks come to Unraid, they're pretty serious. I think they're pretty serious about their backup. And so we see 60 terabytes from Mike and Mike Howard, Mike Uyghur, who's running 18. That's still pretty serious. Like, that's still a serious amount. We see some large ones. What do you see in the community? And just give us maybe a state of the union address, so to speak, of Unraid.
Sure. So, as far as what the average community member has in terms of storage,
what are you seeing out there? I mean, certainly we have 2 great examples of this thing just working, and I'm assuming you kind of hear some of that across your community, but just kind of give us an update on how you feel like things are going right now and how the community is.
Oh, I think the community's doing great. I think we're doing great. Community's doing great. I think development pace has increased dramatically in the last 2 years. With Unraid 6, we started pumping out releases at a much more frequent pace, and we've maintained that pace. We've added a lot more people to the team. I think the number of folks that are getting their hands involved with Unraid now has increased dramatically. So yeah, we're seeing great results, and I think 2019 is going to be a banner year for us. I think it's going to be huge.
Both Mike Howard and Mike Uyghur, and then you guys just jump in here. Otherwise, you know me, I'll just dominate the conversation. So they both asked this question, like, what's the future? And so can we talk a little bit as we kind of think about the rest of the year? And we understand you got things you can't talk about, so don't do that. But we're not a scoop show. We're a sharing community show. So tell us what's coming.
You're willing. I mean, don't restrict him. If he wants to share, let the man share.
No, I'm just trying to be polite. So, John, what's coming up?
Okay, so as far as 6.7 is concerned, it should be stable soon. I'm not going to give you an exact release date because the guys that are responsible for that would probably beat me up pretty hard about that one. So, but it is going to be coming out very soon. As far as future goes, let's talk about it in 2 buckets. One is product features, things that people want to see inside the OS, and the other is how we can kind of change the game and deliver some services with it as well. So when we look at developing anything for Unraid, it really goes back to the kind of the history of the company. We always build things that we use ourselves. That's where we start. So there's always guys that are going to come to us and throw something out from left field, say, oh, please add ZFS to Unraid. And it's like, okay, well, there's people out there that might want that. But there's also other solutions out there that already do that, and they do it really well. And we don't need to get our hands into that jar, because we wouldn't use that ourselves. We like the way our array works. We like the way our cache pool works. We don't think that's a necessary feature. So we tend to focus on things that we use ourselves. The other thing that we do is we look for opportunities to make things easier, because that's the one thing that I think really separates us from a lot of the other, I would say open source or free NAS software solutions that are out there. They all kind of focus on being a business offering for IT professionals, which is great. But then when the home user wants something that's very easy and very flexible, they're not as good at that. So we stay focused on that. And what we see is that when people click start on the array for the first time, they format their devices for the first time, there are a number of things that they immediately do thereafter. And there's setting up Plex is probably the number one. That's probably the number one application that our community of users uses. But you guys all had similar applications set up on your systems to accomplish similar things, either it be backup or remote access or security, whatever it might be. Those are common things that you're doing over and over and over again. We see that across our community. So if we can find ways to make that process even easier, as in push button, as in you don't actually have to go get a container, it's built into our offering out of the gate, we think that would be valuable. So that includes things like doing secure remote access. So if you guys are running 6.7 or 6.6 even, how many of you are leveraging HTTPS for the web interface? You're not? Okay.
Not me.
If you go under the settings page and you go to, I think it's under identification. I'm going to get yelled at now because I can't remember off the top of my head which page it's under. But if you go in there, you can actually turn on HTTPS support. And our main concern with that was we didn't want the experience that you get when you do that with like your router and you don't have an SSL certificate and you get that nasty. So we actually partnered with Let's Encrypt directly, and it's built into the UI where you can provision a Let's Encrypt SSL certificate for your local server. And so you're able to then do HTTPS:// and then it's tower or whatever your host name is. And that resolves with a valid SSL certificate over an HTTPS connection. So right now that only works locally, but we have it in development right now to make that work remotely, which means you now could then remotely access the actual web GUI itself for Unraid from anywhere in the world over a valid HTTPS connection. Wow. So that's something in the roadmap. And then once that's possible, that opens the door to a whole lot of other stuff that we can do to make it easy to, let's say, back up your server to the cloud, or maybe connect to somebody else's Unraid server, sync data with somebody else, sync data with another server you own. So these types of things I think would be really, really powerful and really easy to use if you didn't have to go through all the extra steps of setting up the individual containers for them. So we think those container solutions are great, and they show us what people want to do with the technology. But then we look at how many steps. If you had to write a guide and say, here's step 1 through 50, if we can bring that down to steps 1 through 5, and that's all it takes, that's a win. So I think that's, from a services perspective, that's one of the things we want to do. We want to make the most common things that people want to do, remote access, securely, backup online, backup to the cloud, all those types of things. We want to make that an out-of-the-box experience. And then separate from that, we want to add tons of new features into the OS itself.
With that Let's Encrypt, I was really excited actually to see that. I saw the announcement of it. I just hadn't gone in and made the change. So I use Let's Encrypt in the Docker as a reverse proxy for all of my items internally, especially for, I think for Nextcloud. If you use Nextcloud, you probably have Let's Encrypt set up. Is the integration with them, are there plans to expand that into other areas besides just the homepage SSL?
So like the web, yeah. So imagine trying to get into your VM or trying to get into one of your individual container interfaces. I'd like to see that certificate capability extend to that.
Yeah.
So not just to the web interface itself, but yeah, once we can tunnel and provide that secure tunnel to any device anywhere in the world over the internet, there are so many different things that you can use that to do. And then there's other technology that we're working on right now to make really secure connections, peer-to-peer connections that are completely separate from remotely accessing it through a URL. And once you can get down that road, now you're talking about basically a VPN service that sets up itself and that you don't have to pay for. That's not necessarily part of a third-party service that's delivered by some third party. You can actually tunnel directly between two machines and not have to go through an OpenSSL or OpenVPN type solution, something that's even more native.
So would the thought there be, Mike Howard and I, we both have these boxes and we would love to back up a little bit, one share of each other's to each other?
You got it.
Okay. Wow.
You got it.
Yeah, I'd love to set up one at my parents' house and back up to them. When you talk about making things easier, back in the early days, and while I've played with Linux, I don't really know Linux that well. And in the early days, setting up like Crash Plan was a little difficult, but things have gotten so much better. And I've never feel as a user that, wow, I need to know more Linux to use this thing. It really never gets in the way at all. And with the Dockers and everything you have now, setting up backup and doing those things, although I don't use Crash Plan anymore, when it was so much easier today than it was just a few years ago. Things have really moved forward.
Well, there's a fun story about the whole Crash Plan thing. So the reason that it got so much easier is because of how Docker containers work. So I think if you're talking about how it used to be that you had to modify a bunch of INI files and punch in all these variables and then save them to the server and then hope everything works. And if it doesn't, now you're really scratching your head because you had nothing to interact with like a UI.
Yeah.
So what changed was with Docker, we were then able to build essentially VMs without the overhead of a VM. And then we could actually pump a UI into there. And now it's just about creating a VNC connection. So once you're able to do that, because the whole challenge with Crash Plan was they didn't make a web interface. They didn't make any web type interface. It was all either a Linux or Windows based app. So all you're really doing with Docker is running it in a container that's got a UI and it's running a VNC connection to interact with it. And that way we get around having to load all of that UI stuff into the OS itself.
Yeah.
John, Andrew's asking in the chat room, and this is a good question for anybody new to Unraid. When we think about the architecture really quick, we mentioned cache drives and spinners and all those things. Can you give us just a quick 2-minute when we think about architecture, and particularly his question is there any tiering or any caching where data that's used more sits closer to the faster drives than data that's not used very often maybe sits on slower drives? So can you talk a little bit about the architecture and maybe address that question?
Sure. So I will directly say that storage tiering, when I hear that, that's a specific term referring to a specific methodology. And we do not do storage tiering in the most traditional sense of it. We do offer a cache. So here's the general idea. People who write data to an array do it in a few different ways. Either they're copying files over the network. So I think of either coming home with my phone and I have pictures on it and I want to back it up to my server, or I could be running an application inside of Unraid like Plex or like something else, and I'm downloading something from the internet. So therefore the download's happening local to the box. The experience that people care about isn't the stuff that's running on the server, because that stuff is not slowing you down from doing anything else. It's when I'm copying from something like this, I want that to go as fast as possible. So the answer to that problem is our cache pool. And so what happens is we build a pool of devices that are not structured the same way the array is. And by doing that, we can front-end write operations to the array, to this dedicated set of devices, and it can go far faster. And then at night, when you're not using the system, it moves that stuff back to the array. So as far as storage tiering, where, I've accessed the file, can I promote that file from living on the array into the cache? We don't really do that today because the vast majority of our users don't need it. But it is something that we might look at in the future.
Yeah, because one of the things I like about Unraid is it's not splitting your files.
Right.
Your file, the whole file sits on a drive. In a really bad situation where you lost more drives than your parodies can support, you're only going to lose the data on that extra drive.
Well, there's more value than that. There's an awesome story that I can tell you from one of our moderators that lived in New York who had a flood. And so here's the value of storing data on individual drives, and not just storing data on individual drives, but formatting each drive with its own file system. So in a traditional RAID, you're striping all that data across all of the disks in the system. And when you lose too many disks, all the data is lost. But because we do that on individual drives, the benefit is that when a drive does have a problem, like let's say you suffer some kind of corruption, the file system repair tools can typically resolve that. Well, in the case of this moderator, he had a flood, half the server was covered in water, okay? He did the old method of take the drives out, put them in a bag with some rice, let them sit for a while, pop them back in, and of course, there was tons of file system corruption. But using just standard file system repair tools, he was able to recover the vast majority of his data. And of course, the drives that weren't wet at all were totally fine. If that was a RAID, there's no chance he would have gotten a single file back. Just not a chance in hell. Just wouldn't happen. So that really speaks to the design of the software, and it's not focused on that raw write speed performance that traditional RAID is. It's really focused on ease of use and better resiliency.
So I've got to ask, just because you mentioned it, what is the best way to get photos off my phone every night over to my Unraid server?
Best way? I mean,
I've tried
how many different ways do you want?
I've tried Plex, I've tried Nextcloud, and nothing's working great for me. But those are the only two I've tried. Is there like an awesome Docker container that works really well? I just want these to go to a share and be done. That's it. Every night, just do it. Or whenever I'm home, I guess. Doesn't even have to be at night.
I think with Plex, the problem is that they store the photos in a subfolder off the app data directory by default.
Yep.
And that's kind of a pain. So I think you could actually remap that folder using a Docker volume mapping. So you could basically tell the container, here, map this folder that seems local to that app data folder, and then map that to a share. That's one way you could solve that problem. The other, I think you could use Tonito. Is another Docker container that's kind of neat. So Tonito is like having Google Drive on your running off your server, and then you can download either a PC app, iOS or Android app to it, and you can remotely connect to it. And they also, similar to Plex, they give you a URL, and it's a something.tonitoid.com, and that's how you log into it and get to that stuff. Well, that app, I believe, features a photo backup where you can then say, here, back this up to this share. So as far as a single best one, I mean, I've used all of them to do it, and they all can do it. I don't think there's any difference really between them. It's just whether or not you want to go through more steps to configure it. So maybe Tonito would be a little easier.
Right.
The Explorer Grapher in chat says Nextcloud does it for me on the fly, no problems whatsoever. I found out I needed to make sure that the app was on my phone was allowed to run in the background to work properly.
Yeah, okay. Nextcloud's been okay, but it struggles with certain file sizes. Even if you like, for all of the videos, some get uploaded, some don't. So I do like Nextcloud. Nextcloud was okay, but it wasn't perfect for what I do. That's what you use?
That's what I use. It runs into an issue every now and then, but for the most part, it works good for me.
Okay.
And I haven't tied it down to a file size thing. Maybe I need to check it more.
And Mike Weeger, there was an OwnCloud, Nextcloud. Is there a battle going on between those two, or wasn't one?
I think Nextcloud is going to be the winner. I think it was, if I remember the history correctly, the developers from OwnCloud and went over and started Nextcloud. Okay. If I remember correctly. So Nextcloud is essentially what the developers from OwnCloud wanted it to be, and then OwnCloud is still going. I think they're both still fine. I don't think there's any issues with either. I know that Howard and I both run Nextcloud, and I love it. Nextcloud has been, that's another one that was just rock solid, except for the photo upload that I just talked about. One problem. Everything else.
Explorer Graphic said until he ran that background process, it didn't work properly. He says the issue has changed since he did that, and he uploads 4K files all the time.
And that's my photographer friend, AD Will.
Okay. Well, then that might solve my issue. I'll have to look into that.
Okay. Super good. Any other questions along those lines, Mike, Howard? Anything?
No.
Okay. We had. Let's see if I can bring that set of questions back up. Oh, I'd ask you this, John. I'd asked you this early on about the community. When you think about the typical community user that you see, and I know that's hard, but what's the community? Can you find like a theme for the community as far as who's using it or how they're using it? Do you have a certain user base like photographers or stuff like that stands out, or is it pretty varied across the board?
It's pretty varied. I mean, we definitely have, I'd say the largest group of users that use the software is for home media serving use. That's the number one group I think that we're dealing with. And then there's plenty of professionals that use it, both photographers, videographers, video production houses, different places will use it for mass storage, long-term repository, stuff like that. But then you got other kind of unique use cases. I see all sorts of crazy use cases across the board. I talked to one guy that worked for a car dealership, and he hooked up a number of Windows VMs in Unraid to his security camera setup and used Blue Iris with an NVIDIA GPU passed through to the VMs to power the video encoding to the server locally. And he set up all this advanced network tunneling and VLANs, and I was blown away. I'm like, wow. So, I mean, that's pretty cool. So I never saw that before. And he's like, yeah, it works great. Works like a champ. I'm like, that's awesome. And then of course you've got Linus. Like Linus always, he never ceases to amaze me. This guy is crazy. I mean, when the first time we talked to him, the whole idea was, hey, you know what we can do that's pretty cool? We can do 2 gamers on 1 CPU. It's like, that's awesome. Let's do it. And he's like, how about 7? And I'm like, what? What? And then he goes, how about 10? How about 10? And we're going to remotely stream them using Steam Link. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I do? So
watching him build that was one of the best things ever.
It was crazy. I mean, and he keeps doing that kind of stuff all the time, and it never ceases to amaze me. It's amazing. It's just cool.
He's good. Space Invader, the guy who does those videos, is pretty good
yeah.
too.
And Ed is great. He's such a great dude, and he's a huge help in the community as well. Like that guy has created so many guides for how to do so many different things, and you know,
his guides for the newbie are, I mean, that gets you through, right?
Yeah, I use it for Nextcloud. Yeah.
Yes, the Nextcloud was perfect instance. Like Nextcloud was something that I probably would not have been able to figure out. I could have piecemealed maybe some other tutorials together, but he makes it so simple. And we talk about sonar and radar and all those things, and he just has great advice in general.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought he's not an employee of Unraid then. He's just a community member.
That's correct. That's correct. But he's an awesome guy. His videos are such a huge help. I mean, we get emails and support. I handle most of that. And so a lot of times people will be like, how do I do this? And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to send them a link to that video because that is such a good guide. It's like, we can't do it better.
Yeah. All right. I have a question that hopefully nobody gets mad at me for asking. But, you know, we've talked about I've been a user for 10 years, which means I hadn't paid you anything in 10 years.
Well, I mean, I accept donations. If you, I'll give you my PayPal if you want to.
Feel that guilty, Mike.
You know, I love working with being a customer of, not working with, being a customer of some of these smaller shops like Unraid. You know, you're not Adobe. You don't have thousands of employees, because I think you guys respond more to the user base than some of these other bigger companies. Another one I use is vMix as a software encoding thing. But I often, wonder, because I want you guys to live for a long time, the company that is, and how do y'all deal with that going further? You have to continue to get new customers, or maybe build additional servers, because so far I've only paid you once.
That's a great question, and like I said, I'll give you my PayPal later. You can send me some money. No, so look, the reason that we've never charged for upgrades and whatnot, it really goes back to our CEO, and he's just one of these guys that he's like, I don't want to nickel and dime people, and he's always been like that, and I appreciate that. I think that's a really good way to operate a business, and I think it's the reason why we've seen so much growth over the last several years, because we've created a good product at a fair price, and we don't nickel and dime people over it. And so that's been great. But I do agree that to grow and to see continued growth, you've got to either come up with a way to change that model, or come up with something else to offer people that's of value. And that's, I think, the more the direction we want to go, because we don't really want to see Unraid OS itself have to go through that upgrade pricing model, because that's a huge advantage also from a support perspective, is that if someone's having a problem, I can just say, upgrade to the latest version, man. It's most likely fixed. But if I have to worry about people that are running old versions and paying for upgrades and things like that, it even complicates the support. It complicates the user experience. And again, it nickel and dimes people. But offering complementary services, like the ability to connect to other people very simply and make these secure tunnels and back up to cloud services and whatnot, or back up even your flash device. I mean, I think that's a huge one that we already have working in a proof of concept model right now, because that's the most common problem. My flash fails, I lose my OS configuration. How do I get back up and running? And right now there's a little button you can click to back it up, but excuse me, it's manual, right? So if we can make that automated, so that every time you make a change to the OS, that your flash is automatically backed up to our cloud. And then if your flash fails, you can download it, back up right to your new computer and put it on a new flash and boot it up, and you're up to the running again. I think that'd be very valuable. So offering those kind of services for a fee is the way that I think we can really grow the business further without, again, going down this path of charging for upgrades.
I should cover your pricing really fast, because it's super reasonable. Tier 1 basic up to 6 attached storage devices, $60 basically, right?
$59.
Right? Okay, get them on the right page. I just want to make sure. And then tier 2, their plus up to 12, $89, and then the Pro, super reasonable, unlimited for $130. And you're saying that's one time?
Yep, that's what I have. Yeah. Yep, one time.
And if I
And
were,
we
go
haven't
ahead.
changed pricing, by the way, for a long time. We went through one pricing increase in, I think it was 2015, but it was modest. It was like 10, 20 bucks, depending on the keys that we were talking about. But we got to remember when Unraid started was 2005. The biggest storage that most people had was 300 gigabytes.
Yeah.
Right. So
I
now
think I
you're
paid
dealing with 14.
119.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it used to be. So we upped Pro by $10. It's 129. So I don't think anyone's held our feet to the fire on that yet. So
No.
that's good.
No, made it pretty reasonable, and I think you have a free. You mentioned earlier you have a free trial. So if anyone is interested in doing that, what's the conditions of the trial?
You just have to have an internet connection to the server for the purpose of the trial, and it's a 30-day trial. And you can request extensions, up to 2 extensions, so you can essentially run it for up to 60 days if you really need to. But there's no limitations in the trial, so it's like having a pro license. There's no feature limitations or anything like that.
That's super great. Uyghur, what'd you go with?
So I went with the trial originally. So you guys should just, when you get the trial, just send along Space Invaders links, right? Because like first day you get the trial, you go, you YouTube it, you find it, you get everything installed, and once you get it, there's no living without it. So I ended up going. I actually had the basic first, and I thought that was going to be enough. I used the server so much, I'm like, okay, I need more drives, and I went to Plus about a month ago, and I'll probably end up at Pro here in the near future.
Awesome. Well, we'll send you a free pro upgrade.
Sweet. There we go.
There you
Look
go.
at that. Yeah, you know.
Rock on. John, when we think about the future, we alluded a little bit of this in the beginning, but when you think kind of about what you'd like to see, some wish list items, maybe we can get some things from you in the way you use it. Anything you're kind of hoping for or that you'd like to see?
So there's things that I'm excited about that we're working on, and then there's things that we ourselves can't develop that we're relying on open source to handle. So like that's the thing with Unraid, where there's a combination of open and closed source components to Unraid OS, and there's a combination of stuff that we develop versus the open source community develops. So obviously we're Linux based, and our virtual machines are based on QEMU KVM and all of that. And one of the things that I've been always frustrated by with VMs and GPU pass-through is the lack of support for SLI or NVLink. And it's that black voodoo magic that NVIDIA has. And I've reached out to people at NVIDIA about it. And they're just like, yeah, just, it's not going to happen. And I'm like, come on. Because it would be great. Like the use case is really clear. I have a system that's then capable of supporting 2 players when I have a buddy over. And when he's not there, I can get all the horsepower for myself.
Yeah.
And that would be awesome. But there's not a lot. We really can't do anything about it because it involves technology that we're not responsible for. So that'd be a wish list item. Like if anyone from NVIDIA is listening,
First, it'd be a miracle.
Please,
please, it would be a miracle. But you never know.
But then on the internal roadmap, I really want to work on more VM stuff. That, like I said, like that's been my passion. That's what got me to come to Line Tech originally was virtualization technology. And I think that we've barely scratched the surface on what we can do with that stuff. And I think making snapshots really easy, using ButterFS as a file system more intelligently to create a history of snapshots that you can roll back to. I mean, like I remember in November of last year, I think it was November, October, there was that Windows 10 update bug and people were losing data. You guys remember that?
Oh,
Yep,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So here's the thing. In our lab setups, we all use snapshots for our VMs, and we have scripts set up to automate that process. So if any of our users were affected by that, our guys in the development team, they could just roll back to yesterday's snapshot of Windows, and they would just have all their data back. And as far as storage footprint goes, because it's ButterFS, it's just the differential between snapshots that you're storing. So the storage footprint's really lean. So it's stuff like that I really want to bring to the users. There's been a number of challenges to the development process for that because there's so many different ways you can go about it. But it's something that I'm hoping that we can tackle maybe later this year. I don't know. I'm going to get shot at for even saying a year.
No, we won't hold you to it.
Development always takes longer than you expect.
It always does, and especially with stuff. We're always pushing barriers. We're always going for latest kernel releases, latest QEMU releases, latest Docker releases, and we're trying to integrate the latest kernel technology. So, we want to get this stuff into the hands. I hated it when I worked in enterprise IT that I saw all this cool tech that the big businesses got, and then it would take a decade before anybody at the consumer level got their hands on it. And it's like, okay, there's tons of cool stuff out there in the open source world that's just not made easy for people to take advantage of. So the more we can grab a hold of that, the better.
Well, I'll tell you, my buddy, the explorographer out here in chat, AD, is the one who told me you got to go to 6.7 RC5 because it looks so much better. It's such a big upgrade from the one before. And so I did. And the dashboard, I just love your new dashboard.
It's gorgeous.
Oh,
the
thank
new
you.
dashboard is great. Yes.
Well, that a lot of the credit for that has to go to a community member by the name of Mex, who reached out to us, and he's a UI UX designer, and said, "Hey, I really like your product. I'm using it. I have some ideas to make things look a little cooler." And he shot us over some concepts, and we were like, "This is amazing." And so he's one of the contract developers we work with now.
Nice. Cool.
So yeah, I mean it's hilarious how many times. I mean, even most of the contractors that we work with started as users, reached out to us, brought an idea to the table that no one else had thought of, or offered to help in a way that we never, asked for. But they brought so much talent to the table, and so many little projects that were just kind of side things then became part of the OS. I mean, the entire UI that we launched with version 6 started as a community project between two guys on our forum. And then we were like, man, this thing looks better than our own product. We got to we got to merge that code. So we reached out, and they were like, yeah, that's awesome. And now we still work with those guys. So, I mean, it's a great relationship we have with the community.
So on that same token, so when you guys are looking at upgrades, feature requests, I mean, how do you guys pull those? Because, like, for example, the one that I believe is in 6.7, maybe release candidate 1 or 2, correct me if I'm wrong here, but was a simple thing that I didn't think would ever even hit your guys' radar, but was Time Machine over SMB instead of over AFP. Right?
Are you kidding me?
Is that a big request?
No, but it's like something we've wanted forever.
Oh, totally. And I was
AFP is horrible.
It's awful.
It's horrible.
Like, I'm a Mac guy, and it's terrible. It's so bad.
I feel so bad for you.
Yeah,
really,
right.
Yes. No,
Actually, I've seen the other side now. I use a lot of Windows machines, but something that little, I'm like, well, that's just something I'm never going to get, because Time Machine was a great feature that I loved of Unraid, but AFP is so terrible. I knew it wasn't your guys' fault. I'm like, well, it's not their implementation of this. It's just so bad. You guys put in that SMB, and wasn't it in 6.7, right? That you guys added that feature. Great. It works so rock solid now on all of my machines. My wife is so happy because her laptop's backed up. And
did Tom pay you? Did Tom pay you?
I don't even know Tom. Who's Tom?
Tom's our CEO, and I know he is just grinning like an idiot right now, saying, "I told you that's important." And because he was so adamant that we have to get this in as soon as possible. Time Machine is a key feature. We got to make it better. We got to make it faster, and we got to get rid of AFP. And I'm like, I don't use much Mac, so it's not. But we have our developer, our other developer Eric does, and Tom's a huge proponent of using iOS devices, and he's very adamant about Time Machine support. So I'm gonna get a big "I told you so" later.
Well, it's true, and you know what? So I not in my day job, but as a side gig, I love helping people with their home network and setting this stuff up. Yeah. And a lot of the executives that I work for, they are all Apple people, right? Because it just works well, right? Their iPhones and everything like that, and so they ask me about backups for their computers, and I'm like, well, Time Machine technically is just the easiest. It's built in. Like, well, what do I need? I'm like, well, you don't want to use a time capsule because the airport extremes are awful. Right. So I said, and now that you guys have this, I've literally recommended. I'm like, I could just set you guys up a simple Unraid box. Their Time Machine works great. Here we go. And it's been an entry point, I think, to like here. And then if you got the Unraid box, you might as well add blank, 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 all these awesome things. Right. Like, oh, that's awesome. So was
you're using the SMB and the RC version right now?
Yes.
And how's that been working for you?
Rock solid.
Performance-wise, pretty fast.
You know what? Honestly, I have that skip the cache drive anyway, so it's probably at that capped 35, right megabits per second.
You know what you should try? You should try in your UI, go to disk settings, and there's an option called write method, and change that to reconstruct write. Now, just for testing purposes, because what that will do is we codename this turbo write. What it does is Unraid normally just spins up the parity drive and the drive you're writing to. That's all. So the other drives stay spun down.
Yeah.
With it'll spin them all up. And the value is that instead of having to do a read modify write in order to perform an IO operation, you can do a reconstruct write. So you're skipping a whole IO. What that means is that, let's say all your drives average at around 100 megabytes to 150 megabytes a second. You'll get that about on average for your write speed directly to the array.
Really?
So does that mean all of my drives are going to be spun up all the time?
Whenever a write operation is occurring.
Okay.
So when your spin down policy kicks into effect, it'll spin them down. So, and there's somebody out there in our community, I think, I'm going to get yelled at again about this later because I'm terrible with remembering how there's so many different people that have their hands in the cookie jar, but I think it's Squid who's written a plugin to make that like a tunable. thing where you can say, oh, I'm going to turn that on only at certain hours of the day, and then otherwise just do the standard write method policy.
So that's in settings, disk settings?
Yep. Yeah, it should be called like MD tunable write method, I think.
Okay.
I think
that's kind of what we do here at the end of the show. It just turns into a huge configuration fest, and we just actually
MD write method, tunable MD write method. That's it.
So reconstructive write, switch that on.
Reconstruct write, yeah, turn that on. You can do that live, and it should immediately. I mean, if you're writing a file to the system and you turn that setting on, it will immediately improve speed.
Well, actually, my Mac that I'm podcasting on is doing a time machine backup right now, so I'll probably let you know here in a little bit.
Yeah, let me know. I'm curious how fast it goes.
John, is there any reason why we shouldn't do that then?
Well, it spins up all the drives. So, I mean, if it depends on what look, everybody's different. So some people are super, super power conscious, and they're like, I want the minimum power consumption, minimum spin time, keep my disks cold as long as you can. And if that's the way you want things, then doing it where you have a cache drive and then you have the standard write method applying to the array, that's the way to go. But if you're like, hey, I'm all performance all the time, I don't care, I let my drive spin until their heads break off, whatever, then turn that puppy on. There's no problem.
You're talking to crypto miners here. I don't care about power.
Yeah, exactly.
It's still way cheaper than I was running a bunch of GPUs.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it puts more wear on the drives. It generates more power draw. But if you don't care and you're going to replace the drives as they fail, go for it.
The problem for me is I hit it so often with different people in the house, I don't get a lot of spin down anyway.
That's also true for me. Yeah. Well, but Mike, it's only spinning up the drive it needs. So all your other drives are staying down. This is going to spin up all of them if I understand correctly.
But I just checked now and only one drive is spun down. All the rest of them are up.
Yeah, that's usually mine too, especially with Time Machine running all the time. It's usually spread across all the drives anyway, so I might as well turn on and get the benefits of it if they're all on.
And I have all my computers in the house running a Cronus backing up to the Unraid server at different times of the day and night. So, it's getting hit by somebody in the house all the time.
Mine's my Plex. I watch Tatuli all the time because I've been cracking down on all the users. I'm like, guys, let my machine rest a little bit, all right? You gotta give it a break. Who's watching TV at 9 a.m., right? Like, go to school.
That's right.
Work.
It's my brother-in-law. I'm like, I know you're not in class, or you're in class and you're watching a movie, man.
John, one of the thing about Mike Uyghur, we've done these podcasts now a couple years together, 3 years, maybe 4
years now.
And every time we have a guest on like you, like I'm doing the questions, but Uyghur's backly configuring, literally working on whatever technology they have. And by the end of the show, he's got it done. Like
we did a Raspberry Pi arcade build, and by the end of the show, I had it built. It was awesome because I had my Pi sitting here. I was following along. It was fantastic.
Super.
So now I'm making all my upgrades to my Unraid server as we're talking. Okay, what else you got for me? This is cool. Any other
tips and tricks?
But Mike, before we leave this one, I got one more question. Okay. I have mine set to auto. What is that? The MD write method.
I think auto does nothing. I think auto is.
That's what I was on too.
Okay, so auto is. Yeah, if you turn on the help text, it'll tell you auto selects read, modify, write. So the reason that that's in there is that in the future we do want to make that automatic, so that based on certain conditions, it'll automatically turn on that write method. So like you said, if all your disks are spinning anyway, why not utilize that? Like that seems pointless to not. So that's something that eventually I think will make it as a feature into the product. But for right now, we just put that in there so that when we do make that happen, everybody who's already got that setting set, it'll just kick into effect. So it's kind of a placeholder.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good. So reconstruct write, apply.
Yep.
So would that have any benefit if you are writing to the cache though? Probably not, right? It's only when that cache.
No, that only applies to the array. The cache is using ButterFS. Well, depending if you have more than one disk or not. But if you're using a multi-disk cache pool, then it's using ButterFS and ButterFS RAID 1 specifically. So you're getting max write speed pretty much to that pool as it is already. And
is that what you would suggest as RAID 1? That's what I have. I have it mirrored, right? 2 500 gig SSDs instead of making it a terabyte worth of SSD. I'm like, 500 is probably enough because I have it move every day, and I'm usually not transferring over a terabyte of space each day, or over 500 gigs. Sorry, is that usually the preferred method?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the cache pool is there it's for the traditional use case of not even using reconstruct write, but just using the traditional, like I only want my disks to spin up when they're getting data written to them, and only the disks that are receiving the write. The cache pool then front ends that, and it offloads even more from the array. So like if your cache pool is large enough and all of your shares are set to use it, then during the day, your array stays spun down unless you're reading data from it. And that's the only time it spins up is for reads. And then all writes hit the cache pool. That's the traditional use case if you enable the cache pool for everything. So we make it tunable because everybody has a different wish list. So this lets them configure it exactly the way they want it.
Anything else we should know, John, about, I mean, as you think about tips and tricks for the average Unraid, and maybe I'll ask it in this
you just
form.
blew two users' minds right there with that one. So
any changes? We just both changed.
Any other common, like when you're helping folks, or I mean, what are some, do you have any common mistakes that folks make or misunderstandings about the software that need to be rectified? Anything along those lines?
You know, I think that a lot of the problems that people face are hardware specific. There are sometimes bugs that we have to address that are in the software, but to be honest, that the amount of times that those come up, it's mostly in the RC phases. And that's what those are for. It's to iron those kind of things out. And as far as critical bugs like data loss bugs, I can only think of one time during one beta release of Unraid where there was actually a Linux kernel file system level bug that caused silent data corruption. And it as soon as we found out about it, I mean, we ended up being the ones that discovered the bug. Tom, our CEO, had to pour through the code and finally figured it out and had to contact the maintainer for it. It was a scary, scary endeavor, but that's because, you know, not losing the customer's data, that's the number one thing we always have on our minds. So keeping that data secure is super critical for us. And I think with those kind of bugs, they're heart stoppers for a minute. But we jumped right on it and we immediately pulled the release down and we got a notice put up so that everybody that was using that release could be made aware of it and then back to a new release that's stable again. But other than that, we've never really had any major stumbles like that. But when it comes to like the common misconfigurations that people go through, a lot of times it's from not doing the proper research maybe first, or trying to use our community in the forum to maybe pre-guide them on a hardware selection. So we'll have people that'll use things like AMD GPUs and they'll try to do them with GPU pass-through in a VM. And that's very problematic. There's ways to sometimes work around those issues, but it's really a hardware-specific problem. And we've contacted AMD about it, and we've not really gotten very far with that.
So if you're going to do GPU pass-through, you recommend NVIDIA then?
100%. 100%. And if you're going to do gaming in a VM in general, I would recommend Intel still over AMD. It's not to say that AMD doesn't work, but like we were talking earlier about Threadripper, and Eric has a Threadripper 2 build. And I mean, it's great for everything that it does do well as a server. But as for gaming VMs, the performance is not where it should be. And so it's okay. You can skirt by on it, but if you spent a lot of money on a graphics card and you got the performance that you're going to see in that setup, you would not be happy. But on Intel, I mean, that's what I'm using is the 9900K, and it's phenomenal. It's it's close as bare metal as you can get.
Okay.
So stick with reliable stuff. And then when it comes to storage controllers, I heard you say Rosewell, and I'm not going to knock on you too hard about it, but I'll tell you, if you can go with a quality brand storage controller like an LSI controller, I do think those are worth the investment. And then the onboard controllers on most motherboards are also very good. Like there's no
Rosewell
reason
is just
to
my
use
case.
those.
That's just the chassis.
Oh, I thought you said you had bought an HBA, like a Rosewell HBA.
No.
Oh, that's just the chassis. Okay,
that's just the chassis. And then I actually don't know the brand. I have 6 onboard SATA ports, and then I do have a PCIe, SATA card. I don't know what brand though. Yeah, it's probably worse than Rosewell, whatever you're saying, because it was cheap on Amazon. So
yeah, I think I'm with you, Mike. I got that old Athlon and whatever else, and my controllers, because at 1830, how many drives I said I have, definitely the motherboard doesn't have enough space for that. So I'm probably using crappy controllers also.
Yeah, me too.
So I've been taking some notes as you talk, John.
The controllers right now, prices on controllers, I was just looking, they have really come down for some really good controllers. And so that if you're in that market, with both of you might be here after the show, that may be something you can get. LSI controllers are fairly reasonable now, and you can get a lot of enterprise stock that's coming off in a rotation, and for most home users, it's good enough. For what you're doing. You don't necessarily need, some of you need top of the line. I get it. I totally get it. Do you have a particular controller card that you like, John, that works well?
Well, I'm a little partial to the Rocket Raid controllers, but those are crazy. I mean, they support a ridiculous number of drives, and so if you have a very dense storage need, I think those are really great. Those are made by High Point, I think.
Yeah.
And then I guess for the more consumer stuff, I mean, it depends on what you're doing with the server. If you're just doing it as a pure NAS system, a lot of the standard HBAs that you can get out there, either Marvell or whatever, are fine. But if you're doing anything with virtualization, this becomes more problematic. Like with it's weird with the Marvell controllers, you turn VTD on in the BIOS and they wouldn't work right. Yeah. And it's just, it doesn't make any sense. Like that shouldn't have a problem, but for some reason it's a conflict. So, and that might be resolved now on the newer controllers. I don't know. I just stay away from that brand for right now. And also if you're going to do anything with VMs, generally speaking, I would say stay away from Gigabyte. I had a lot of problems with Gigabyte for a while, but I will say the new system I just built is a Gigabyte board because I heard it has the best VRMs for overclocking. So we'll see. I'll check back with me in about 3 months and I'll tell you.
My board's an old school Gigabyte board.
Okay.
It's been working really well.
Stanley out in chat says an LSI 2308.
Thinks that's pretty. Yeah, I think anything LSI is pretty good.
So real quick though, for the people who are maybe so this happened to me, right? This is the first time I hadn't been using a pre-built NAS. I had built my own Unraid server. I ran out of SATA ports on the motherboard. What am I looking for in terms of a card? I know we're using a lot of terminology here, but RAID versus all of these options. What if I literally just need a PCIe card that's going to give me more expansion? What am I looking for?
You're looking for a standard HBA, a standard SATA HBA. You do not want a RAID controller. So what ends up happening is people go and they look for these different storage controllers that have a lot of ports. And what generally happens is the cards that have a lot of ports are RAID controller cards.
Right. Yeah.
So what you can do is if you get one of these cards, depending on the make model, you should be able to flash the firmware into what's called IT mode so that it can present it as a standard HBA. So instead of rating each of the drives, it'll just present each drive as its own device, just like a normal HBA would. So that's fine. I mean, if you can do that, if you can find those cards and find that firmware, that's fine. Otherwise, you end up having to resort to one of two things. Either A, if you only want to add a couple of drives, there are SATA controller cards that you can get that'll add 2 to, I think, 4, maybe even 6 ports per card, which isn't a ton, but it might be enough for depending on what your needs are.
Yeah.
The other way to go is to buy a bigger, more badass motherboard. Get something right. Like we used to make a server called the AVS 10.4, and that used a Supermicro board that had 14 onboard SATA ports built into the motherboard, and it worked out great because the chassis we put it in had exactly 14 storage bays, 10 for HDDs and 4 for SSDs. So, something like that. I like using stuff that's built in. I don't like add-on cards generally if I can avoid them, but if I have to use them, I'll use them.
Yeah, I think I just actually found one I was using. It's a IO Crest 4 port, just like you were talking. It got me through though. All I needed to do was add 4 more PCIe controller.
But it worked for you, right?
Yeah, worked pretty well.
If it works, sometimes.
Then again, on those array ones, I didn't need super fast speed. It was just looking to mainly just get those drives attached and have the storage. It's really me as the only heavy user in this house, and I'm usually hitting the cache anyway if I'm writing a lot of data. So I was more concerned about getting the drives attached than speed. And for the price, actually, those weren't too bad. I think it was, about $19-18 for 4 extra slots, and that was worth it.
Yeah, good. That's the way you can do it. John, we kept you over what we promised I would keep you. So, but we do want to say thanks for coming out tonight and being a part of what we do here. I appreciate your time, and you give us, an hour and a half of your time in a busy schedule to come.
Oh, for sure.
Talk about this. You can see, we're probably a good representation of your community in a lot of ways, right?
Oh, for sure.
As we talk about these, and a lot of fun to everybody who came out tonight to join us live in the chat room. Thanks for jumping in there. It's really hard for me to get through a podcast like this. I am itching all of a sudden now. I'm like, maybe I will build an Unraid.
Finally got you, Jim.
Yeah, I think we got him. Howard.
Come on over to the dark side. It's
Jim.
It's never been a matter for me. It's never been a matter of good or bad. It's just time and materials and equipment. Yeah. And I have been kind of an average guy, NAS guy. So I've gone with I went with Drobo. I had my son work there for a while. And so, kind of Yeah, well, yeah, that's okay. You can say it. In the chat, the joke has always been, because they're so expensive. The chat has always been dollar signs in the chat room. That has been a joke in our community for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. But it is fun to sit in here, and it was even more fun to see Mike Uyghur catch after 10 years. Mike Howard, I've known you for a decade now.
Yes.
Which is just crazy. To see Mike Uyghur come on just 6 months ago and go, hey, have you heard this thing called Unraid? As much as we've talked about it in the community and as much experience we have, there's a bunch of, in the chat room, there's a bunch of card descriptions and motherboards that are being listed out there of what these guys are using. And it's a pretty cool community. I think we also mirror, John, your probably community from a niceness perspective. I keep hearing great things about how helpful and how nice and how just genuine the community is there, and our community is as well. So it's probably why that works that way. So John, thanks for taking some time tonight to be on the program. I appreciate it.
No problem. Really glad to be here.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, we'll have to find another excuse to get you back. You're a pretty good podcaster. So thanks
awesome.
Thanks for taking the time.
Next big release, if you want to, talk about it. There you go.
Yeah.
Come back.
Yeah. Let me know if you guys ever get in a situation where you want to come on and chat a little bit about some things that are forward facing, or you want to get some announcements out, or you want to talk about it. We'd love to have you back on. So don't hesitate to contact me and say, hey, we've got something we want to say. We're really good at that. So
yeah, for sure. I think when we have maybe some demos to show, that would be a good thing to do too. We could do screen share and give you guys some demos. So there's some, I can tell you this, there are some really big things we've planned out for this year, and I'm really excited to show them off, but they're still cooking. So I gotta keep you in suspense for a little bit, but for sure.
Take your time. We want you guys to be ready. And so take your time. Mike?
I think it'd be totally fun too for our community members. If you're listening to this show and if you're setting up an Unraid server for the first time, or if you have one, let's do another one of those where you go to the Facebook group and you post, about your Unraid setup, right? We did server racks a while ago. Show us your rack, and now let's do, show us your Unraid box, or if you're getting started with it. Yeah, well, it wasn't me,
It was even the title of the show.
I like it.
Of the show,
I like it.
So now, if you're thinking about it, I'd love to see your guys' new setups, especially if this is the first time you've even considered Unraid. That'd be really cool. You could tell us that too. So,
Mike, let's send them over to Discord.
Let's use the Discord now that it's up and running.
So if you go to theaverageguy.tv/Discord, you can join us. And I think we're 40 or 50 there now. Many are making it over. That'd be a great environment. In fact, Mike, why don't you jump in the Discord group and create an Unraid channel?
Do that right now.
All right. And we'll get that done. Head over to the Discord server. Again, theaverageguy.tv/Discord. You can join us right now if you want in your live show. And pretty open group, really nice. We don't tolerate crap, so get in there. Don't spam us in there. And we would love to have you in there. And I just saw the Unraid pop up. So Mike, thanks for doing that. John, we've got some post-show stuff to do, but we're not going to make you stay around for that. Thanks for taking the time tonight. And
not a problem, guys.
Jumping in. Appreciate that. Let us know when you're ready to jump back on, and we'll have you back on.
Will do. Thanks so much, guys. It was great seeing you.
All right, John. Take care. Great meeting you. Take care. We'll see you. Pretty great.
Yeah, I am upset that Mark didn't make it tonight.
Oh, Mark Robson.
He's, he and I have been the Unraid guys here in the show for a while.
I know.
I can't believe he missed it.
How cool that the developers, people like John, match the community, match the whole entire thing.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
I mean, we could have nerded out with him. I was like, oh man, like where'd that time go? I was ready for like 10 more quick tips. Let's get in here. Diagnose my Unraid server. What am I doing wrong here? Let's look at it.
Could you remote in? And
can you just remote in and really vamp this up a little bit? That'd be great.
Yeah, we only got the one tip. Mike and I both made a change because of that. Let's go down the whole list.
Right. Yeah. I know there's more.
Well, hopefully we'll get him back on, and it's pretty great. It's one of those, there's some nights when I think about the podcast thing that I do, and we've done 394 of these, and I think, are we done? And then I have a night like tonight when I realize you get the community in here, you get a company like Unraid who is open and transparent, and they got nothing to hide, and they're, it's just great, and you're like, oh yeah, that's what this is all about. This is why I do every Thursday night. I jump on, and this is why we do what we do, and it just kind of. It renews my faith in podcasting to be like, God, this is so awesome. And this is why podcasting exists.
I gotta say, Jim, after 10 years of talking about this, I never saw this day coming.
Really?
I thought there's no way, but then Mark gave me hope, and then Mike gave me even more hope that maybe we'll get something on this show, because I know Dave would never have it on the other show.
Yeah.
And for me, back in the days, I love Windows Home Server. It was a great thing. What convinced me to come off of it was, back when I was making ripping movies, on Windows Home Server, that old one, it would double the file, because that's how it gave you protection. It was double the file, and it was chewing through my storage so much. So I went over to Unraid because it had a different way to protect you. And it was slower. It is slower. I remember PC Doc and some of those other guys posting their speeds, and they were 112 megabit a second, and they were trying to push that to see if they can get 113, maybe 114. That meant a lot to them. And I just wasn't, that didn't matter to me. If I got 100 and if I got 98 or 100, I'm fine. I don't need to get that extra 112 or something like that. So I knew Unraid, you can nearly saturate your bandwidth, your 1 gig bandwidth, right into the cache.
Oh, I do every time. I saturate 100%.
So I'm not overly concerned of not getting even more speed than that. So I never thought of Unraid as a speed demon. So if that's if you don't need the speed demon and trying to inch out every megabit, it definitely has a place.
Yeah. Well, they threw some hardware in the chat, and I started looking. It's like, I got to stop doing this.
Yeah.
I have been looking. My next build, I've got the power supply. I just ordered a 1 terabyte SSD drive. I got to get I need to pick a board and some memory and a chip. But it's gonna be a SATA loaded hard drive. I mean, just gonna go with something I can just load. I don't know if I want to mess with cards as much for what I do.
I know my friend, the Explorographer AD, his name is AD out in chat. What he does is a storage. It runs a Windows VM also, and so he does a lot of videos and 4K stuff like that. And he would edit the video on his his desktop, and then the encoding of it he sends over to his VM on Unraid and lets it do all the encoding. That's going to take it a while, and has a 1060 NVIDIA card over there that helps out with that. Yeah. And like I think John was talking tonight, he's coming from a Unraid computer, the Windows VM inside of that.
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, you can use these. I mean, the encoding server, all of that stuff. Great use case for them.
No, it's super cool. Mike Howard, I'm glad we could finally have a show. Tony Rayner, thank you for making the connection to Unraid. Yeah. I probably would not have done that myself if Tony had made it happen.
Do you know how upset Mike Howard would be if I tuned in and saw a discussion about Unraid?
Yeah, that would have been a huge. You would have killed me, Mike.
I might have finally drove out to Omaha.
Yeah.
We could have finally gotten you out here. There we go.
And maybe get a Waffle House out here at the same time.
But no, you would never get a Waffle House ever.
Well,
but a top quality cigar for sure you would have.
You're saying there's a chance then, right?
I'm not.
You're saying there's a chance.
I'm saying that because you had me on tonight, there is a chance. If you hadn't, there was never a chance
in Omaha. All right. I'm just telling you, if there was a Waffle House in Omaha, we would crush it. I mean,
I know you would.
Be the most profitable waffle, right, Mike? Don't you think? Most profitable in all of America.
You got a pretty good shot here. Yeah,
I know. We love to eat out.
Unfortunately, I have very little influence on where we go.
I know you do. Well,
but thank you to Tony for
thanks Tony for doing that. John, again, thanks for coming on, and really to this community, pretty great. This is kind of why I got into podcasting in the first place, and so it's just super fun to have an interview like that and to get some cool stuff going. So we will, if you're listening live, we'll do a little crypto in the post show. Mike Howard, you don't have to stay around for that if you don't want to. We'll do a little crypto in the post show. We got a whole bunch of folks from the crypto space that came over tonight for whatever reason, so we'll spend a little time talking crypto in the post show. Just a couple reminders that, by the way, Mike Uyghur, nice to have you back tonight.
It was good. Yeah, right.
Yeah, no,
I missed it. I missed it last Thursday.
We missed you.
I might be able to hop on. I don't know, guys. Can I go in the? No.
Nah, you did the right thing. You look like you're enjoying yourself. So.
We had a blast.
Yeah,
absolute blast.
You did the right thing. That was super, and the best year to be in. You were in Colorado, right? Skiing?
No, we were in Wyoming, Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Still awesome. Yeah. But great year to be out skiing. Couple reminders: if you're a regular supporter of the show or a regular listener to the show, if you want to support us on Patreon, you could do that. We have $1 and $5 plans. No pressure if you want to do that or not. TheAverageGuy.tv/support, or I think TheAverageGuy.tv/Patreon get you out there. If you want to join that group, don't forget the Discord group we mentioned earlier. TheAverageGuy.tv/Discord will get you there. I think I got that link finally right where it doesn't expire, and so you can jump in there. In fact, I've seen a few of you jump in tonight, so we appreciate you doing that. And if you want to start some discussions in there, we only say keep it civil. That's kind of in our groups. If you go off the rails, I'm going to throw you out. I'll just be honest. I don't tolerate a lot. I don't think it'll be that way because this is the best group in the world. But just remember, we're all civil to each other. You can contact the show. Send me an email, jim@theaverageguy.tv. Find me on Twitter @jcollison. And don't forget to join the Facebook group. Mike mentioned it earlier, facebook.com/groups/theaverageguy. But I'll be honest, with all the trouble Facebook is having, let's just move things over to Discord slowly but surely.
I would totally agree.
I'm okay with that, by the way. And if we want to head over what we did in Facebook and head it over into Discord, I would be perfectly fine with that. Don't forget the AverageGuy.tv platform, both web and media hosting, powered by super fast servers over there at Maple Grove Partners. Get secure, reliable, high-speed hosting from people that you know and you trust. We just had Christian on Cyber Frontiers 54. He was at the RSA 2019 conference. He had 2 sessions that he covered, and it took a whole hour. Like, the dude is amazing. So if you haven't resubscribed to 54 or resubscribe to Cyber Frontiers, you can do that, and you should do that right now. Get over there and get resubscribe to it, listen to it. That kid is the smartest kid in the world. I am not going to lie. It's pretty. I just sat there, and he just talked. It was pretty amazing. So get over there, Cyber Frontiers 54. But if you need hosting, he's got plans for $10, as little as $10. MapleGrovePartners.com. Then don't forget about our app. Best way to listen on the road. Spreaker hosts it, but you guys sponsor it through our Patreon subscribers, so we appreciate it. We are live every Thursday. Oh, by the way, hold on before we go. I just got to show this. You remember that Pampered Chef HelloFresh thing that we did?
I knew we couldn't get out.
No, I can't get out of here without it. You have to watch the video. You have to come back.
What is that? Is that a wine tumbler?
This is a wine tumbler that we got as part of the hostess gift for hosting that Pampered Chef thing.
Now I can get on board with the wine tumbler. That sounds pretty nice.
Dude. Yeah, the best podcasting wine tumbler. It keeps it the optimum temperature while you're podcasting.
And you got the quiet when you set it down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got that little pad on the bottom there. Super quiet when you
look at that.
Oh, it's super awesome. So thanks to everybody who did the Pampered Chef stuff with us. And if you haven't tried HelloFresh yet, life-changing, at least for me anyways. We had it tonight. It's regularly becoming a Thursday night. Sarah doesn't work Thursday, so she has dinner ready. I always come home late. We race to get to the podcast. And so if you need a coupon to get some stuff free, get it done. We are live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, out here at theaverageguy.tv/live. I want to appreciate you for coming out and listening tonight. We'll do a little post-show crypto, so stay around for that. With that, we'll say goodnight, everybody.